Welcome, Miss Emerson. Good to see you again. Waiting on a few more folks and we'll get started.
Excellent.
All right. Let's go ahead and jump in. Good afternoon and welcome to Transforming Workforce Management Investments into an Operational Engine with Shelly Simkins. Pleasure to have you guys here. We're going to jump right in. Shelly, please introduce yourself to our group here.
Sure, absolutely. I am Shelly Simkins. I am the founder and CEO of Synapse Shift Advisory. We are an advisory firm that essentially does optimizations from a strategic perspective, regardless of what workforce management platform you may have or be on. And we approach our work very much from a strategy lens of process strategy and governance, and then tie the technology through to help technology better enable operational users. So a little about myself. I am a clinician by background. I'm a nurse by background. Have a deep passion and love for making technology work for operations, particularly in the healthcare space around the frontline workers. I have spent time working from a strategy consulting perspective at both Accenture and Huron Consulting Group. So I have a large experience and depth in really helping operations not only leverage technology, but how do you create that strategic plan and how do you begin to implement on that strategy? So I'm excited to be here talking about how you transition your technology from shelfware into an operational powerhouse and how we're helping clients do that.
Thank you so much, Shelly. And I will be your moderator, Fatima Nash. I work alongside Shelly as we continue to transform not just healthcare systems, but workforce management systems across the country. So with that said, let's set the stage a little bit and get a little bit comfortable as we'll spend about 40 minutes with each other. We want to invite you guys to get off mute, pop questions, suggestions, feedback in the chat if you so desire. But we're here to get down in the dirty. We're here to talk about what happens after an implementation. When the technology you fought for, we all fought for, sits idle, the adoption lags and the ROI never materializes. So, Shelly, what can we start off with that? Like, talk to us a little bit about that statement. What happens after the implementation?
Yeah, so after the implementation, a lot of times I call go live good luck, because at the end of the go live, essentially, basically, that technology typically is owned by IT, and that is the way it's been for many years. And a lot of times it's a very IT driven initiative. So therefore, the technology is just seen as something that is put in to collect data, whether that's scheduling, timekeeping data, payroll data, financial data. And there's really not a lot of afterthought on how do we best take this technology and really grow with it. And really grow with it and really understand what the vendors are putting out from a roadmap perspective, what they're releasing quarterly, and sometimes even more frequently than quarterly. But you have this passing through various IT structures within these organizations, and they don't know what they have their hands on. They don't know the gold mine they have their hands on. But I want to back it up just a little bit. Let's back it up a little bit into why people put these technologies in and why we're seeing in the industry shift a lot of this rip and replace. So typically in organizations, when I get involved in the sales process, there are problems on the horizon, whether that's optimization and they want to keep their current technology, but they have some frustration. So they think they just need some technical optimization. Then we start talking to them and find out it's really not about technology. This is really about the upstream. This is really about how are you setting up your framework? How are you going to leverage your processes in order to enable that technology? So great question to ask in the sales process is this going to be a transformational initiative? Is this tied to a larger strategic initiative within the organization? Or is this a technology first implementation? And I think that that's absolutely pivotal because that aligns expectations very, very quickly. and it aligns on how you're going to approach that implementation even. And then that transcends through the implementation past the go live on how are you going to continue that strategy and evolve that strategy. So there's a lot of what I call hidden value sitting in today's technology. A lot of these organizations have gone with a very technical first implementation for a variety of reasons. And then what happens is once they get that in, then it's what I call the chasm of shelfware as to whether the technology goes and sits on the shelf as a data collection system, or what are we going to do something with it and make it meaningful.
So, Shelly, even
yep.
before we go into the shelfware talk track, right? Like, talk to us about the stakeholders at the C-suite and also our tech partners about what their expectations are pre-sale cycle.
Okay. Yeah. So the executives typically have a high level strategy they've got to implement, that they have to put in place. Now, this could be anywhere from the CIO looking at tech stack strategy, tech consolidation stack strategy. This could be anywhere from you've got the COO who has a plethora of operational areas reporting up to them. They're under pressure from a productivity perspective. How productive are my employees? How well are we staffing and scheduling? Same thing goes with other executives in the CFO is how do we reduce costs, or how do we increase our revenue so that we're not having falling margins and we're within the margin performance that we need. In fact, I actually just read an article out of Becker's yesterday where a lot of the large health systems are still in negative margins, even post-pandemic. So the CFO is even more looking for how do we leverage technology in order to offset the operational costs, because costs are going up. Cost of living's going up. That transcends and translates back through benefit packages from an HR perspective, an increase in hikes there. It transcends through workforce management and pay equity that is going on across the nation right now, as well as now you still have the legacy, what I call the legacy problems. You've got the legacy problems of turnover, of vacancy rate, of, all of those metrics that we used to look at. So you have these executive priorities that are stacking up on one side of the table. They're looking to technology to help come to the table to solve this. So from a technology expectation perspective, these executives are really looking for what technology can give me intuitive insights. Where can I go quickly and find some opportunities? How can I leverage and bring in things around even AI? AI is kind of new. We're still kind of toying with the concept, but now it's becoming more of a reality even over the last 3 years. So how is AI going to come in and play in this space in order to give us the insight that we need, that the executives need in order to make better decisions and predictive decisions? And they're also looking for ease of use. I think I've talked to many executives. They're tired of hearing the same story of the technology just doesn't work. I'm going back to using spreadsheets, paper, name your tool. And a lot of organizations are kind of stuck in that middle ground right now. They want this technology to work for them. So from a pre-sales perspective, when you're sitting there from a technology perspective and bringing in technology, it's really about speaking to the business case of what business operations and these executive strategy are and how they're trying to solve that, and how your product actually comes in and very articulately and very, what I call methodically and surgically carve out the case studies that's delivered this result. I mean, that is power when you're sitting at the sales table talking with healthcare executives and you're really trying to get that deal through. Think of that from a value selling perspective rather than here's what the features and functionalities of our technology. And I see both sides of the equation a lot of times when I'm sitting at that table, and not all the time. So I want to be clear, not all the time is transformation out of the gate before a technology implementation needed. Much less is their appetite in the organization for it. So organizations shift relatively quickly in their mindset. They may go into it from a transformation perspective when you're sitting at the sales table, but as they're getting into the implementation, as budget starts constraining because we're using hours from an implementation perspective, as things are shifting from a project timeline perspective, that transformation starts fading into the background because we have to get the technology in. And there's not a right or wrong answer. You can always optimize on the back end. That's why I think it's very crucial in the beginning of these implementations that you set out some guardrails in a sandbox of what is going to be in what quote unquote phase one. And if that just means minimal viable product, that's fine. But let's have a plan to immediately get into phase two, which would be an optimization. And then how do we continue to layer in the product that makes sense for business operations and the analytics too?
Good point, Shelly. So when you think about the delta between transform putting the tech in and transformation, would you consider that shelfware? Like, can you define that a little bit for us?
Yeah, so shelfware is where I see organizations have put great technology in, and IT will tell you that it's really good technology. There's a lot of really good talking of systems and transferring information across systems. But then when I put a different hat on and I go talk to operations, I hear about how it just doesn't work, how it doesn't work, or they don't know how to leverage it and utilize it because it was technically configured, but it wasn't trained operationally. And this is where I see a lot of mismatch in implementations, and how training strategy actually gets rolled out in these implementations is not from an operational base. It's from a click here, click there, rather than here's my daily workflow. Here is how I use the technology alongside what my normal daily workflow is. So I think there's a little transition that I'm starting to see in the market, particularly around micro learning and some other training research that's going on with the training experts of how this training is being delivered. And there's some pretty innovative ways to in which they're delivering training today in order to close some of that gap, to not have technology turn into shelfware.
Right. Because I'm assuming that the lack of uh, adoption, when you think about training and even change to a certain degree, the tech gets abandoned, right? Because folks don't understand how to use it, how to apply their click down knowledge. And that leads to misalignment between expectations between IT and operations, as an example. Would you agree with that?
I would. I actually, and there's I was trying to think where I saw the statistic at. Like in the last month, I saw a pretty profound statistic that says once you put technology in from a technology implementation perspective, the fall off of user adoption goes all the way up at times to 65% 6 months out of the gate. And the reason why, if you think about the change management curve, you're coming off the high of the good luck go live, and then you start falling from a change management perspective because people now they've learned the system enough to know where to click, point, and navigate. But now there's this struggle on how do I really adopt it into my actual workflow? And that is where we start seeing user adoption fall off significantly.
So what's the solve for that from your perspective? How do we
Yeah,
get folks not to just drop off and not abandon the technology?
Yeah, I think you have to have infrastructure in place. And infrastructure, and what I mean by infrastructure is I mean that you need to have a solid foundation and a plan, that the technology implementation is not a beginning and an end date on an implementation project plan, but that it's actually a continuation of your workforce management strategy and practice. So as you are moving forward and after you get through with the implementation, that is where you already need that foundation in place. Now, with that, is that a governance structure? Sometimes it is for organizations. Sometimes some more larger organizations even have workforce management strategy offices. This is where that office would essentially need to own that. There are times when it is a sort of coalition that comes together across multiple hospitals with a deep operational understanding. And let me be clear, this is owned by operations. These initiatives are no longer owned by IT. The IT is a supporting part from a supporting the technology perspective. But typically in organizations, I see this led up and sponsored by CHROs, CNOs even. Not so much CNOs because that's just nursing, but think about those executives that have a broader span and have some input into that, where there is other operational initiatives that are going on that essentially there's an action plan behind that. You're planning ahead. This is where then we start talking more into getting heavier into how you're leveraging analytics and how you're going to begin to lean into AI, how you're going to be able to bring all of those pieces and parts together. So it's not just a one and done, put the technology in. It's more about what is your overarching strategy and how can we begin to thread the pieces and parts through operations and have that supporting structure of IT, have the supporting structure of change management offices, training strategy. Think those areas, they're all supplemental to the overarching committee.
Absolutely. So it sounds like true success isn't your go. What did you call it? Get luck. Go, what did you say?
Your go
Go
live, good
live,
luck.
go live. Good luck. It's about user adoption and operational impact. So if I'm an SI or I'm a client leader, what's my first signal that the investment might be turning into shelfware?
Sure. So I'm going to give you two examples. One is that I've noticed this even as I've been sponsoring technology implementations for several years now. I can figure out very quickly when it's going to get shelfware when we get into testing and going into training and go live. That I can tell very much with a telltale sign with organizations, whether it's going to die on the vine after implementation and everybody's going to walk away and say, great job. Or there's going to be an awareness that comes about to say, wow, there's some pretty powerful data coming out of the back end of the system. We need to be talking to our enterprise data team. We need to be talking to how are we going to essentially basically take this and understand, possibly marrying this up with financial data to understand, I've got 18 LOAs in a department. My overtime spend is 14%. My absence rate is 9%. I need to do something. I need to increase my core FTEs from a budgeting perspective and or utilize some type of float pool because I can't constantly turn to travelers at an exorbitantly high rate, and I can't have them basically living like they're my full-time staff for years on end. And this is where, there is some visualization that's lacking in the industry right now around that. Technology certainly is catching up with us and catching up with the operational need, but we're still a ways off. And we're a ways off of, you can give the data views all you want and all day long, but if leaders don't understand what they're looking at and what they need to do with it, and there's not somebody there mentoring them on how and walking them along that journey, then it's going to be yet again another analytic visualization that somebody looks at and says, oh, that's nice.
Looks pretty, right? Okay. So how, if you're talking to me and I'm sitting on the C-suite, how will I get this knowledge? What should I do? Like, what would you tell me to do?
Yeah. So the first thing that I would tell you to do is I would tell you that understand what you already have. When I'm talking with executives in general about technology and or how they're going to solve their operational issues that's going on in their organization, is that you got to understand your starting point. Where are you starting from? Are you starting from, I don't have anything? Or are you starting from some level of maturity along a maturity matrix that we look at and that we utilize to say, I need to understand where you're at in that journey. And then we need to start from there and move forward and come up with a plan on how we're going to get there. A lot of organizations that I say, and I agree, I heard an executive told me this within the last month that I was on the phone with. He said, we don't have a data problem. We've got an insight problem. We have all the data we could ever need in a multitude of systems. We don't have any insight.
Agreed. So when you think about insight and you think about the WFM maturity matrix, can you talk to us a little bit about where you often see your clients land and orientate us a little bit, if you would, to how we all should be using this matrix?
Yes. So I use this a lot with organizations. It helps them very much ground. I love because I show this to them and they're like, well, we're really foundational in these areas. But I think we're like emerging or adapting in some of these other areas. And I say, you know what? That's completely fine. I've never met a healthcare organization that says, Oh, we're fully emerging. We meet every checkbox underneath emerging. I have never heard that from a client. However, it's normal to have a blend. It's normal to be, let's say, from a technology perspective, way ahead of the curve, but we're not there from an analytics or process perspective. Where I would say the biggest struggle is around the governance. People are still very foundational. I think we're just now starting to see very early adopters of large health systems who are saying, there's something to this now. The technology is caught up. The data's there. We need to start picking it up and doing something with it. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I mean, in all honesty, there are tech vendors out there that have taken a really good, I would say, first blush at this. Palantir is one that comes to mind. They put together some digital twins, some great, very robust, high-end analytics with a handful of people in the nation that actually know how to use it. So I think in some ways we've got to back the train up. We need to get established in our foundation and then move forward, because as we're moving so fastly through this AI emergence that's happened over the last 3 or 4 years, there's a lot of startups out there that have a lot of AI functionality. There are a lot of legacy companies out there that are starting to bring in AI, but we got to be smart about when to use it, where to use it, and how to use it. And AI is not always the best answer for every problem that's out there. When you don't have a good, strong foundation to move from, it's just will end up being another piece of shelfware.
Yeah, for sure. So thinking about that, Shelly, and thinking about the work that you and your CTOs doing in this space, can you touch a little bit about how you guys have come together and brought in AI to help support governance models across the workforce management systems?
Yeah, we've actually taken and leveraged AI for good. And essentially, basically, the product that we leverage and utilize is we leverage a network analysis. So you may be asking, well, what is a network analysis? So a network analysis is really about 120 different algorithms that are run on data related to any organization that we're working with. So think of it in this way. Typically, when you put together a project team or you put together a committee, who do you go to in organizations? People that served well on committees in the past, executives who did well at an executive sponsorship or didn't. And you look at the traditional org structure is what you're really looking at. However, what we utilize in our work as we're going in with clients is we take 120 different data points and we look at it, and we look at the culture. We look at who is influencers in the organization. And this is influencers all the way down to the very front line, who their sphere of influence is, how well they penetrate and or cross collaborate across an organization. And those names are the names that actually feed our governance structure. And it becomes a very highly effective, high engine running system. And the reason why is because we're leveraging the large language model that we have running behind the scenes in order to extract the right people into the right slots into that RACI chart, so that as we're moving forward with whatever work we're doing, sometimes those names even shift depending on what we're working on, because we know that there's certain skills and there's certain attributes that we tag and meta tag that we know that we need. So it's actually a more robust, fluid governance structure rather than this fixated traditional governance structure that you see.
Yeah, I'm sure your PMs love that, because you just said the magic words to me, RACI, right? Like responsible, accountable, consultative, and informed. That acronym kind of sets the stage for PMs to execute their governance model at maybe a local level, on a project level. And so by having a strong governance model plus technology, it allows the project team to accelerate faster, and you get to support your customer faster because you know who to talk to, when to talk to them, and how to talk to them to get them to move from an organizational development perspective. So I am a raving fan of AI as it relates to building strong governance models for our organizations across the country. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Well, there's a great side benefit too, right? So
yep.
With our LLM running in the background, this tool also can help predict attrition. So
Mhm.
as we're contemplating this and we're giving these network analysis, the side benefit that we give to the client is, oh, and by the way, here, the reason why we might not have chosen some of these people is that according to our algorithms, they are at high risk of leaving your organization here very soon from attrition perspective. You may want to get an action plan in place, or you might already know this. And believe it or not, when this tool was put in, this tool has been presented out. When you get to that point, we've had more than one executive CEO. One of them actually even said, sitting in the meeting, she just resigned this morning. How did you know that? So it's giving even side benefits that, frankly, we didn't go into this governance work doing, expecting these outcomes, but we're able to deliver even above what the client's expecting with these results.
So thinking about that, thank you for that. And thinking about the overlay of AI and this governance model and all the other variables that go into a successful tech implementation. How are you able to tie that back? Thinking about your CFO avatar, how are you able to tie that back to ROI for these on the shelf technology systems that's collecting dust? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of ways that, essentially, basically, this helps from a CFO perspective. One is that with the operational process work, tying that in with technology, even leveraging the AI that's built into some of these products already, particularly in the workforce management space, it's a green field, it's white field, whatever you want to call it, but it's open space right now, and I think it's open space ripe for innovation. But from a CFO perspective, when you can net savings to the bottom line, leveraging AI, creating more cost-effective models, creating more synergy with data that helps leaders make better decisions in real time, that's going to make a CFO enormously happy. And this AI even goes outside of workforce management. There's a ton of stuff going into denials claims right now in pre-auth and rev cycle. I mean, there is so much AI that is churning in the background that is producing massive results. And I mean, we can even go into things that don't even touch the front line around things like energy spend with organizations. A company that I talked to 2 weeks ago, essentially that's what they go in. They actually leverage AI as part of their work, but they're driving millions out in energy spend out of organizations, and they're now working with healthcare organizations to do this. And I just said, what a fabulous way, because it's not touching people. How wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. And when you think about all of the AI, all of the optimization, you think about all the front end, the back end, because these projects, sometimes go on for, 1 to 2 years. Talk to us about the end user satisfaction. Like, what are you seeing right now in the industry as far as, because SSA, you guys are pulling in all the stops to offer full 360 degrees of consulting with these operators. So talk a little bit about what you're seeing as far as what you're putting out there, and what is that yielding for the end user?
Yeah, so I would say there's a couple of things. So from an end user perspective, they're getting super excited about having a mobile experience. Like, that is like full stop, first thing. Users are like, this is awesome. It's almost like, it's a mobile first experience. That's what they're wanting. They have it with their bank and everything else in life. Now they have it with their workforce management system. So that's making them super happy. I would say that other things are, if from an energy perspective, as you're putting that technology in, it's almost like creating FOMO, like you want them to be excited and moving that forward. But I think there's also the FOMO of optimization, because this is where we get into conversations about, okay, we didn't get it right in the first initial design. We can't get everything right. What would you change about it? Let's talk about that. Well, is it really technology, or is it really about change management and process? So this is where we really start pulling the thread apart and really start looking at it from a very granular level to say what's driving what. And then also we're keeping up with what the vendors are releasing from a quarterly basis or earlier, to basically say, you know what, let's put a pin in that, because I think that's probably going to be a release from a product perspective in the next quarter or two, but we'll come back to that. And we have a robust plan that essentially basically we put a pin in it literally, and then we bring it back up and say, let's talk about now we're at product release. Let's talk about how we're going to integrate this into your organization.
So I want to go back to mobile for a moment, and I would love for you to educate us on the top three reasons organizations don't go mobile first.
A lot of it comes down to geofencing. A lot of it comes down, and from a geofencing perspective, I think we've gotten most of the way. However, when you start getting into, buildings and going up and down in elevators, and if you talk to anybody, they want them as close as possible to where they're going to clock in. They don't trust the system. They don't quite trust, even clients really don't quite trust geofencing yet. And I think that's the biggest constraint with us. I think there's got to be some evolution just in general with geofencing companies on increasing that technology and moving that technology forward to the next evolution before I think you're going to really get like real buy-in. Plus, you also have union complexities, CBA complexities. A lot of employees actually are like, well, if I got to use my phone, then you should pay me a stipend. And we've already had conversations with organizations about that and how they're going to handle that. Are they going to pay the stipend, or are they just going to say it's voluntary, but here's other options? That's typically the middle ground that I see. But well, all that saying, when the end user starts seeing what they can do on mobile, they're not really concerned about their cell phone stipend at that point, because the benefits outweigh what they really wanted reimbursement for. So they end up utilizing it anyways. And then they hear from their friends that, essentially, oh my gosh, are you joking me? Why are you going on a computer to do this? You
checking your schedule
on your mobile phone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Where do you think policy and procedure play a part in getting prepared for an optimization, as such as utilizing mobile? Like, we just keep it really simple?
It's extraordinarily hard. Policy is one of the most underestimated changes that have to happen, because there's so much at stake and so many people involved. And it is not easy to change policy. In fact, actually, I run across a multitude of organizations that don't even really have a policy infrastructure in order to facilitate those changes. It's really in a very small group of individuals, when it really needs to be quite more built out and more robust, and some more rigor around the process in general. So I think that's another area that there's a struggle.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, in your space, would you agree that optimization is a revenue multiplier? And if you do agree, which I'm sure you do, tell us how.
Yeah, no, I absolutely think it's a revenue multiplier. I think it's a revenue multiplier on both sides of the equation. I think it's a revenue multiplier for help for any organization that is going through an optimization, because there's definitely going to be some financial ROI that's going to be associated with that optimization, especially if you're bringing in outside help like myself or any of my consultants. There's definitely going to be some value that is going to need to be gained. So operations is getting what they want. The technology is working better. The technology is getting finessed, even with the process change that's going to need to occur. However, on the vendor side as well, I think that that's definitely a win-win, because there's going to be upsell of product. And the reason why I say there's going to be upsell of product is that there's going to be new features and functionalities that are going to be released, new product releases that are going to come out, things that are going to need to be upsold. And this is where a lot of times we kind of sit in that middle ground between the client and between the vendor landscape and say, yes, we need to actually bring this in. You need to buy this additional module. You need to buy this additional functionality. Let's say that we're talking about analytics, right? So there's a lot of analytics that's getting pushed out in different releases and or new technology that the vendor landscape's pushing out as we're moving through the current realities in the various industries. So this is another area where, to me, the vendors actually really win in this space. Plus, it keeps their product sticky. So there's not maybe some difficult conversations when it comes close to renewing software contracts where the client's happy and it's like a no-brainer. It's like, oh yeah, I mean, we'd never get rid of you guys because we have so much invested and it's working so well now.
That's right. Okay. So we reached almost the end of our time. I cannot believe that that went by so fast. I could talk to you all day. In fact, I do most days. Um,
Well, let's talk about analytics for a little bit. I want to make
yeah,
sure that we cover
yeah,
analytics. So let's
absolutely.
look at
Go
a
for
couple
it.
of these other slides that are on here.
Yeah. How about that? Let's see. This
So
one?
let's talk a little bit about the data landscape, because I think this is a big deal right now. And it's been a big deal for a couple of years. And I think now we're starting to get past the, oh, this is nice, my data is in a data warehouse, to let's do something with it. Well, people are doing stuff with it now. So you've got all of this rich data coming into a data warehouse, majority of people do, or a data lake. Name your consolidation of your data. So it's typically workforce management data, it's ERP data, it's payroll data, it's EHR data. It's all sitting in one place. However, what clients are having a difficult time doing right now is, what do I do with all this? And how do I even start blending this up to make meaning of it? Right now, in today's world, what we see is we still see it be utilized very siloed. They're pulling just pieces and parts. They're keeping it within its own little kingdom, whether that's workforce management, ERP, or payroll, or EHR. Sometimes we're seeing organizations who are blending pieces and parts of it. They're not blending the whole picture together, but they're blending very much pieces and parts to it. So you might be blending workforce management data with acuity data with volume data, typically what we see in the workforce management space. What's not happening, and where I think the next evolution needs to go, is how are we operationalizing it? We're doing correlation studies. Let's correlate some of what's coming out of your ERP from a financials perspective, and let's correlate that back up through HCM, your recruiting metrics, and then let's cross-reference that over into your workforce management scheduling and daily staffing. And oh, now I got a much different picture about what's driving the overtime and premium labor spend. It's not what I thought. My FTEs aren't aligned. My FTEs aren't aligned. Oh, I was working with a client not too long ago, and I said, oh, you got plenty of people in your organization. They're not dispersed correctly. And so therefore you have a lack of visualization from what's coming out of your workforce management data in order to get your people moved across your organization like you need to have them moved. So this is where we've got to now get to the next evolution, and Synapse Shift is actually doing that right now, where we're actually bringing some of those analytic views, surfacing them in ways that are becoming much more meaningful and tying back to net ROI, not something that a consulting firm walked in and said, oh, I think I can save you this amount of money. No, we're actually netting it out to the bottom line, those actual savings. So I don't really call my consultants aren't consultants, they're operators, because they're going in and they're actually getting the work done. We're essentially basically going in and operating beside the client.
I love that, Shelly. So, what haven't you shared that you want the market to know about you and your operators?
Sure. Yeah. So I would say that we're very different than your traditional consulting firm. Like I said, we're going in, we're actually getting things done. We're working directly side by side with clients. We're wanting to make a difference in how the technology is utilized, because I'm a firm believer technology is a wonderful, wonderful asset in the toolbox of workforce management strategy. And we've really got to start turning that engine on. And some of that starts with analytics, and really where you're going to start on your analytics journey and how you are going to better control, because product companies are going to continue to release probably even more rapidly than quarterly, some of them. So this is where it's trying to keep up with what's going on with the technology that you own. And you can't, organizations, I'm finding they don't have the bandwidth, they don't have the skill sets, and they don't have the people to do it because of all the cost reduction and constraint and squeeze that's coming. So this is where we're a great asset to bring in, and we come in and we're there and we're sticky with the client, and we're not in and out in a month or 2 or 3 months or 4 months. We're actually staying with them and they're seeing the value. We even operate we're even going to be operating some of the organization's workforce management strategy offices so that we can actually help them harness the whole package together.
Wow. Shelly, thank you so much. There are 3 points that we want to recap, and then we want to open it up in the last 5 minutes if anyone has any questions. So, this is what I think I learned today, but you guys keep me honest. We need to identify our shelfware. We need to reconnect our tech goals to our operational reality. That means bringing your operators to the table when we're having discussions about technology. And then you want to partner with SSA, but honestly, you want to partner with an organization for optimization and governance. Um, Shelly, anything that I left off there
I don't
that you
think
want
so.
people
I
to take
think you
away?
listened well today.
Oh yeah, it's the first day back in the office after GTMX, and so I am a little bit still cloudy from last week. Okay, Q&A time. Anyone? Looks like I have a question in the chat. Oh no, it's just right back at you, Christina. All hearts. Anyone have any questions for Miss Simpkins?
Hi, Shelly. Karen Emerson.
How are
Uh,
you?
I'm good. Great information, as you always deliver. I have a question, and hopefully it's good for everyone. How do you deal with organizations? They're not quite future forward. And as you mentioned, a lot of healthcare organizations are dealing with negative margins. And so, of course, they're risk averse to do anything. Where would you start with them?
Yeah, well, I would start first by having a conversation on operationally what are they trying to achieve? Is the number one priority cost reduction, or is it innovation and essentially basically bringing innovation offerings to their organization that transcends and translates into cost offset from a long-term perspective? And those are really 2 different conversations. I get into both with organizations and with executives on exactly which side of the coin they're looking at how they're going to improve their margins.
Excellent.
What other questions are out there? Shelly, where can folks grab some time with you? How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, they can. Well, you can get a hold of me on LinkedIn. You can also go on our website. There's a place where you can book time with me to have a conversation on anything and everything workforce management related, regardless of industry. We're in multiple industries. So, but yeah, those are probably the 2 primary places that people can reach out to me.
Wonderful. Well, Shelly, we will be back on 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, right in between a major event with UKG and Turkey Day. And so we'll get back together, and please, you guys look for those invites via LinkedIn. And we will be happy to get back together and talk a little bit more about optimization and technology. Thank
All
you
right. Well,
very
thank
much.
you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Miss Simpkins, and thank you all for joining. And you guys have a wonderful afternoon.